Hello and welcome to this evening's Australian Sailing Club Conference webinar. For those who don't know me, my name is Alistair Murray and I'm the Vice President of Australian Sailing. This is the second of three webinars and they complement the Club Conference program that kicks off in Adelaide this weekend and does the round of the States. We'll be saying a little bit more about that later. Tonight we'll be hearing from Joel Steendam from Network Insurance Group. I've had the pleasure of meeting Joel at quite a few functions over, we figured, about the last 4 or 5 years. Joel will provide an update on club insurance options, public liability, personal injury insurance, property and boat insurance. As I said, it's the second seminar or webinar. Last week we heard from Sarah Ogilvie and Ash Brunning about National Club Pathways. If you missed this presentation, then you can find it on Australian Sailing's website and social media. And next week we'll have the third in the series of webinars, which is an update on the new racing rules of sailing from rules guru Darren Eager. A reminder that this webinar automatically places all viewers on mute. However, we encourage you to use the question and answer function, the Q&A function, which you'll find on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you'd like to interact with Joel at any time through his presentation, post your questions there and he'll enjoy dealing with them. Handing over to you, Joel. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alistair, and thanks for having me. Always good to be back and talking all things insurance, as everyone always finds very intriguing. And it's something that is a very significant source of confusion for a lot of clubs. So look, today I think what I will do is I'm going to run through some of the basic covers and considerations that the clubs need to be aware of. And once I've run through that, then we'll throw to some question time so I can answer any more specific questions that anybody might have at this stage. And following on from this, I believe it's being recorded, but there will also be a whole bunch of information on both our website and the Sailing Resources website as well. And that varies from information around clubs, class associations, training centres and everything like that. And then there's also some contact information on the last slide where you can get in contact with me directly if you have any more specific questions. So here up on the screen at the moment is just some of the basic covers that every club should be considering. Liability insurance, absolutely the bare minimum that a club needs. The personal injury insurance is something that Australian Sailing has in place that they take out on behalf of your financial members. And then there's the property insurance, the marine hull and management liability, and now a more emerging insurance as well as cyber insurance too. So I'll go through those in a little bit more detail. So the public liability insurance, we have a national program at the moment in place that's through a company called Nautilus. A lot of clubs, use different brokers. They might even use direct insurers for their public liability insurance. It's really important to make sure that you get the coverage right. It's really important to also make sure that you are actually using a marine industry insurer, because if not, quite often the non-marine industry insurers have exclusions for on-water events that you might be holding. So if you're hosting a regatta or an activity of some kind that's based on the water, which is one of the fundamental things that a yacht club is going to be doing, you may not actually be covered if you're not with the correct insurer. So it's really important to check that and make sure it gets looked at every year when you do your renewals. So the public liability extends to all activities for the club. If you're doing any fundraising, you might be doing a Bunnings sausage sizzle, you might be hosting an event at the club, you might be hosting a regatta, and then also some clubs quite often hire out their facilities, and it would extend to cover that too. It's really important though to make sure when you are placing your public liability insurance to declare any and all activities to either your broker or to the insurer that you're dealing with, because if you're not declaring all activities that you're engaging in throughout the year and something occurs on one of the activities that you didn't actually disclose to the insurer, they're within their rights to not honour that claim. So if anyone had any questions around that, I can go into some more really specific details about the program that we've got in place. So contact me and my contact info will be at the end of this, but it's really important as well to just check what exclusions you have on the policies as well. There might be hot works exclusions. If you've got any members that are down in the yard working on their boats, doing any hot works, it's really important to make sure you've got that coverage and that you've declared that to the insurer. Like I said, if you've got any commercial kitchen activities, anything like that is just really important to declare and make sure it's not excluded. So the personal accident insurance is a program that's put together by Australian Sailing. So any of your financial members will be automatically covered by this policy, and it also extends to cover your life members and any sail pass participants as well. And it also covers voluntary workers whilst they're on the premises. So it is a basic level of cover. So it covers out-of-pocket medical expenses up to $5,000. There's additional extensions that include things like broken bones and broken teeth. And then there's set benefits, with the highest benefit being the unfortunate event of a death, which is set at 75, and then funeral expenses on top of that. And then for different kinds of injuries, there's different set benefits around that. So it's not intended to be a replacement of an income protection or a life insurance policy, but it's meant to be there as a base level to support your members when they do incur those financial expenses. Just moving on. So the property insurance, most clubs have business package insurance, which will be cover. You don't always need to cover the building. Quite often it might be owned by the local council and you only have the fit out and the contents, but it's really important to make sure whatever contents and or stock that you do have is declared correctly so that there's no risk of underinsurance. There's also business interruption that you should be thinking about in case of a claim that makes it so that the club can't operate for a period of time and you are out of income for that period. And then the general covers like theft, glass and general property covers as well. Now this type of policy wouldn't cover any of the club owned boats. It's really important distinction to make sure that you're aware of is that regardless of whether or not they're sitting within the premises, they're not covered by the contents coverage under your business insurance. You actually need the marine hull insurance for any club owned boats, which I'll go into next. But we really recommend that this gets looked at on an annual basis, and it gets looked at by more than one person within the club. Quite often we see a treasurer that's been there for years and hasn't done a proper review of the sums insured for a period of time, and they're massively underinsured, or they've missed things because they think they got it right last year, we'll just roll it over and continue down that path as well. With the business interruption insurance as well, it's really important that you consider what your indemnity period is. So the default for most insurers is 12 months. When you're considering a total loss claim, if you're responsible for the building, it may not be 12 months that you're back and operational again. It can be a whole heap of hoops that you need to jump through, whether it be local council, planning permits, local council, bringing anything back up to code. If the building is out of code and it just needed repair, that can take a really long time as well. So we generally recommend that you consider a 24-month period of indemnity for that, because what that does, it tops up any lost income for that 24-month period until you're actually 100% operational again. So this is what I mentioned before. So the marine hull boat insurance is there to cover the club-owned boats. There are what I do recommend normally is particularly if you're hosting events, that you check that your members have at least third-party liability insurance on their boats as well, and that they confirm that by providing the club with either a certificate or some kind of a proof of the policy. But for any of the club-owned boats, you can take out, there's a number of different insurers actually that play in this space, that take out a fleet policy for the club-owned boats, and that will cover you for the use of those boats, whether it be a safety boat or a starter boat, and it can cover them comprehensively, or it can cover them just for third party only. It's a relatively inexpensive policy when you're looking at third party only, but again, it's really important that you have that cover for the boats, because like I said before, it's not automatically covered by the business insurance as a contents item, particularly when it's out on water, and if you do injure somebody, it can quite often turn into a large claim. So that was the basic covers that you should be considering as a club. Now, what I wanted to do is run through that relatively quickly, because I am keen to actually get into question time, because I know a lot of people do tend to have quite a few questions at these. A number of clubs are built over water and required to have full property insurance by their landlord, but there is a standard exclusion in their policies for damage done by sea. Yes, that's correct, Chris. Quite often insurers will exclude damage by a storm surge, which is something that can actually be negotiated back into the policy by your broker, and some insurers do accept that. But correct, as standard, that is an exclusion that is in most policies. So it's really important that you need to be aware when a club is over the water, that you need to declare that to the insurer, and have that exclusion removed. Now that normally does come at an additional cost, but it is possible to get that covered. Next question. Many clubs now operate drones as part of their social media activities. Assuming this activity is declared, will it be covered under public liability? Similar to hull insurance, can the club-owned drone be insured for loss? So you can cover, you'll be able to cover the drone from a property perspective under your business insurance. So that'll be a general property item that you need to declare to the insurer and have that specified for whatever value it's worth, and that will cover it from a property standpoint. Now, it's really important that you declare that you are using drones with your public liability insurer. Not all insurers will actually accept that. So it may be a situation where you have to get an independent liability coverage just for that, the use of that drone. But some insurers do accept that, but it's something that you need to declare. Sorry, Chris, I just saw your follow-up question. How do you recommend dealing with that exclusion around the storm surge? You need to find the right insurer, basically. Not all insurers will accept removing that exclusion. So we recommend you either get your broker working on it, or if you need some assistance, I'm happy to look at that for you. I know for a fact that QBE are one of the insurers that will write that back in for a cost. And they're quite a good insurer from a property perspective. So that's one recommendation I can make. But there are a few insurers there. And someone made a good point. I didn't mention association liability. So the management liability or association liability can be considered as more of an internal type coverage. So it covers you for internal crime. It can cover you for statutory liability, employment practices liability as well. If you have an unfair dismissal claim or a harassment claim of some kind, or some kind of allegation that comes forward internally from an employee, that can be covered as well. It also covers tax audit, and there can also be some cyber extensions in that as well. So if you have, say, a phishing event, PH, not F, so a scam email event that sees a financial loss to the club, that can be potentially included in those coverages as well. So, hi Joel, any significant claims recently you can discuss from an insurance perspective? Look, we did have a relatively large liability claim recently. I won't name who it was for privacy reasons, but it was actually occurred a little while ago. But it was one that had the potential to be huge, and the club's done a really good job of rectifying it. But there was a gate that was that was faulty, and if you've got any gates to your boat yards that are automatic, it's really important to make sure you're maintaining those. A really good example here was the sensor wasn't working correctly, so if a vehicle went through, the gate would stop, whereas if a person went through, the gate wouldn't stop. If the person was just walking and a person happened to walk through as the gate was closing, and there was some injury there. So that the club has done a lot of work in maintaining that and ensuring that rather than having their insurance policy respond to a claim, that you're aware of the current exposures that the club has, and you do a review of those on a regular basis, and you do whatever you can to mitigate having a claim. Because at the moment we are seeing, and this is to answer your question as well, Peter Wallace, there are rises in premiums at the moment, and if you do have a claim, it's only going to be increased exponentially more. So it's really important that we can demonstrate to insurers, and they really enjoy it when we do demonstrate to them, that you've got really good risk mitigation practices in place. Next question. Last year it was mentioned that insurance may be removed for volunteers over the age of 70. Has this happened? No, not yet. And I don't think that will occur. The maximum age on the personal accident policy is 87. Does fire consuming boats and storage shed get covered by the marine hull? If you have them covered comprehensively, yes. It will not be covered by the business insurance. It will only be covered by the marine hull insurance. If you have over water structure, is there a difference between, say, fire cover versus seawater damage cover. Look, most of the time, if you had that exclusion, regardless of whether that storm surge exclusion was in there and you had a fire, generally speaking, the insurer has accepted the risk, and fire is one of the basic coverage principles of any property insurance policy. So if you had a fire and it leveled the premises, there wouldn't be an issue of coverage, and that exclusion wouldn't come into play, even if it was over water, because the insurer would have to have been aware of that when they accepted the policy. What if part, in brackets spar, of a boat is damaged during road transit to or from a competition? Is this item covered, please? Yes, so most marine hull insurance policies, when you've got comprehensive coverage, it also includes transit cover, so to and from an event, and even just to and from your home to when you're training as well. We saw our public liability and business split in two this year. Our insurances for these two policies are now approximately 50% more. Is this a trend? Plus our old insurer left off all the important things we need. We are seeing that some insurers are making changes to what they're offering as a standard level of coverage. So that's, again, some of the traps that I was sort of saying to be aware of. Make sure you're checking what exclusions you do have in there, and make sure that you're declaring all of your activities to your insurers. But it really depends. Some insurers will allow you to have the public liability on the business insurance as well, which is why it's called the business package insurance. But like I said before, quite often most of those insurers aren't necessarily marine industry specialist insurers, and the liability section will have exclusions that are not suitable to the club's needs. And we have been seeing some increases to the pricing, but 50% sounds extreme. So I would probably have a chat. I'm happy to have a chat to you about that, but yeah, 50% would be on the upper end, and it may be that the insurer identified an element that they thought that they've been undercharging on in the past. I'm not sure, but that seems quite high. But what we're probably seeing on an average basis would be in around the 20-25% mark. What would the position be for members' dinghies stored in a club's over water premises? So that there's two elements to that. Like I said earlier, making sure that you confirm that your members have their own marine hull insurance is important for this, number one. But then also declaring to your liability insurer that you are storing members' boats at the premises. And if you do declare that and they accept that, there's a section of coverage called property in care, custody and control. So if there's damage to those boats and the club is negligent and can be proven to be negligent in the damage that's caused to the member's boat, and they hold you responsible for it, that section of cover will actually act to protect and cover the club. Whereas the first point of call, you would say to the member, well, you need to rely on your own marine hull, but then failing that section of cover under the liability would come into play. Is there any chance of setting up a scheme whereby clubs could become members of? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, Edric. Is that in regards to marine hull insurance, or if you could just clarify that, that'd be great. Happy to answer that one though. Can't see any other questions apart from that last one in here. No? Oh, there's another one. Thanks, Chris. How is the market for foiling dinghies and cats looking? It's been a challenge at times to get racing cover for a foiler, even through a world sailing class. Yeah, I'm experiencing that as well. It's becoming harder and harder to get cover, particularly for the A-class cats as well. Insurers are really pulling back on that. Nautilus is definitely one that's pulled back on that. There's a number of different insurers that can look at it though. Oceanic Marine is a good one to have a look at, as well as Pantaenius can potentially do them too. But generally speaking, Nautilus and Trident, who are two of the other marine insurers, are stepping away from that. They really don't like the foiling activities. And then just on that as well, and it's probably only captures a smaller portion of members, but when you do have boats that have professional crew on there as well. It's important to make sure that you're aware of which insurer you are using for your marine hull insurance, and that those professional skippers or helmsmen or crew are actually declared to your insurer as well, because not all insurers automatically cover professional crew. So that's another thing to think about as well. What is the best way to insure boats for hire, i.e. places 5 there's always a member in the boat. If you're hiring out to the general public, again, that then turns from a standard marine hull policy to a commercial marine hull policy, because if you've got income attached to that, there's only a select few insurers that will do that. But normally speaking, as long as you're declaring that to the insurer and you're giving them the information that they require, it's just something that you need to form as part of placing that policy. There's about 4 or 5 different insurers that will accept that. Okay, any other questions at all? That's another one. Okay, Edric, I just read that. We can. It's something that we can look at. I'm familiar with the access scheme that we've got in place. I work with Clinton on that. That's probably one that we best to take offline, I think. If you don't mind, if you could give me a call tomorrow, we'll have a chat about that. What factors do insurance companies normally consider when determining the premium to be charged for public liability to sailing clubs, especially amateur clubs? Great question. So there's a few different rating factors for that. Number one being the club's annual turnover, and I know for amateur clubs that usually is on the smaller side. And then the secondary factor to that is how many members you have, how many senior sailing members you have, how many junior sailing members, if you have social members. Those different types of category of member come into play as well. And then also if you host any events throughout the year and how many people you expect to have at those events. So they're the main things that drive the premium for most insurers. Offshore racing insurance is another problematic area, both large cats and 40+ offshore races. Is it the case we are such a small market, the premium pool doesn't cover losses for these classes and hence coverage not readily available? In a way, yes. It is also a byproduct of the market tightening as well, particularly around what I was saying before around that professional crew element. I'm in talks with Australian Sailing at the moment to try and find a solution for that, actually. So sit tight, and there will be something that comes out probably in the next month or two, which we'll be doing a bit of an information gathering exercise of almost an expression of interest for people that need some assistance in that area, so we can help. There is a growing number of sailors at different clubs sailing restored vintage boats. These boats are normally only used as specific regatta. Is there short-term insurance available for these? These boats are really hard to insure. Insurers don't like the older boats, particularly when they're timber, and especially if they're sitting in water and they're not taken out of water and they haven't had an out-of-water survey for some time, which quite often they don't. So insurers generally will not accept a short-term coverage for these older boats. They'll require you to have a full 12-month policy. Looks like that may be it for now, unless there's anything else. Just as well, I'll go back to my contact information here. If anyone has any questions or wants to talk to me, that's the best email to send me an email. And if you leave me your details, I'll give you a call and we can chat through it all.
Thanks for your excellent presentation, and thanks for making it short so you could leave time for questions, and there was a good quality of questions. Just listening to you, it's clear that be clear to the audience that they're listening to somebody who really understands the insurance game, and particularly as it applies to boating and their club environments, and that came through loud and clear. So thanks for that. Really good practical advice. Like, for example, having more than one person at your club. Look at the policy to make sure that you're discussing it at committee level, that you have the appropriate covers in place. But lots of practical advice and from a very experienced person, and you can be contacted, Joel, through this local Australian Sailing Office, or you've offered your contact details direct as well. And I know you'd encourage and welcome calls at any time. So great presentation, thank you.
Not a problem at all.
Good on you, mate. Next week's webinar will provide an update on the new racing rules of sailing, being presented by Darren Eager. And this weekend, our first in-person club conference will be held in South Australia, and then doing the rounds of the states. And I know that our CEO, Ben Houston, and President Daniel Belcher will be in attendance personally at those. We'd love to see you all attend them. As mentioned last week, the conferences will be held in each state over a full 2-month period. So just please check the website, the Australian Sailing website, to see when it's coming your way. You can register on the club conferences page on the Australian website. You can register in advance, which you will find under the community tab on the Australian Sailing website. So that wraps it up for this evening. Thanks to our team members, Olivia and Claire, who put the conference on. Thanks again very much to Joel Steendam for your excellent presentation. Most importantly, thanks to everybody for tuning in and taking so much interest and asking so many good questions. Hopefully we'll see you at next week's webinar as well, and also at one of the club conferences. Thanks very much, everybody, and good night.